incredible source of power and driver of power in California. If you look at the climate policies that the state puts forward, or the close to $55 billion climate package that's about to get signed into law, so much of that can be traced back to research, and research done at the UC and CSU system, research funded by California. And so for us at the California Strategic, it's an opportunity to share power with community, to bring community into decision-making within research that ultimately produces tools, outcomes, and sources of information that are ultimately going to support policy and systems change that actually leads to health benefit, to positive outcomes for our most under-resourced communities. And so as part of that philosophy, that belief at the California Strategic Growth Council, as funders, we built our climate change research program around that philosophy, requiring that our researchers and academic partners actually partner with, and in many cases fund, community-based organizations and community partners to help inform that research, not just as stakeholders, but actual partners, thought partners, experts in that research. So I'm really glad to be here today. It's an opportunity to chat both with our academic partners, our research partners, but also our state partners who are ultimately taking a lot of this research, turning it into funded projects and policy. And so we hope that today's panel sparks reflections around current research paradigms, and the following networking session after this really provides the opportunity to foster continued coordination and collaboration between communities, researchers, and state agencies. Do we have Chancellor Muñoz in the room today? He's on the tour. Okay, so again, maybe to make up some time, I won't introduce Chancellor Muñoz to then reintroduce us, and maybe we'll just get to the panels and we'll share some expertise, some lessons learned, and really an opportunity to think about how the state can continue to invest in community partnerships within research, again, as a source of power. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Natalie, my colleague, to talk a little bit more about the climate change research program. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Natalie Obaldia. I'm a research analyst with the Strategic Growth Council, and I'll be providing a brief overview of the climate change research program. So Assembly Bill 109 directs the climate change research program to support research on reducing carbon emissions, including clean energy, adaptation, and resiliency, with an emphasis on California. The Climate Change Research Program advances the California Strategic Growth Council's vision to support healthy, vibrant, and resilient communities by investing in actionable, partnership-based research to inform climate actions that directly benefit California communities for all. CCR provides grants to California research institutions to advance tangible outcomes and fill critical research gaps that address the state's climate goals by reducing greenhouse gases and building resilience to the impacts of climate change. To date, CCR has awarded over $30 million in 3 rounds of funding to 20 research projects from 25 academic institutions with 97 non-academic partners. SGC has successfully set up an innovative model dedicated to advancing climate change research that furthers the Council's vision to advance key California climate and environmental justice objectives through applied community-driven research. I will pass it over to you, Trey. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Trey Spikes. I am the California Council on Science and Technology Policy Fellow for the Strategic Growth Council, and I'm currently working with the Climate Change Research Program to help meet California state climate goals. I want to introduce our first panel. Our first panel is a panel of community partners who have partnered with our researchers who are funded by the CCR program. And they're going to speak to us about as community-based organizations, what they would like to share, or they would like to share their best practices and insights for researchers seeking to adopt a research model that partners with communities. I have the pleasure of introducing Angel Fernandez Boy. He's a postdoctoral researcher and lecturer for UC Merced, so one of your own. And he works with the Social, Environmental, and Education Network. And then I also have the pleasure of introducing Bernadette Austin, who works with the TJAG program. So with that, I'll turn it over to our panelists to talk more about their work and how they would like to partner with researchers.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Oh, no.
Test. Okay.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming here. As Trey says, my name is Angel, and I work with SEEN, the Socio-Environmental and Education Network, and I'm also a scientist at UC Merced. And over the last years working here, I studied here and then I continued here. I've been trying to merge my academic work with the nonprofit work that we do with many communities. Our organization started teaching workshops for children in 2016. Most of the children from vulnerable communities, the kids of migrant families, sometimes undocumented families, some of them didn't even speak English. It was very inspiring to see them learning about science, learning about these topics, robotics or archaeology or ecology. And it's very, very beautiful to see kids when they have this spark of they learn something new and you change their lives. Over time, we started working more with environmental justice because many of these kids come from disadvantaged communities and we had the opportunity to get more involved with this kind of work. And we engage a lot with communities, with disadvantaged community stakeholders, with community leaders. We have partnerships in most of the southern San Joaquin Valley in many tens of communities. We have conducted many interviews and we have joined the communities as allies. And I guess for today, I can be very brief. I would like to give you maybe two main messages. The first message is that if you want to work with disadvantaged communities for funding, for somehow to promote your own work or to do something that benefits you, you have to become a true ally of the communities. You have to be there when you want, but also when they need you. And sometimes there is no funding for you to do that. Sometimes you will have to volunteer. Sometimes you will just have to write a letter of support or give a couple of ideas to a community leader. So it doesn't need to be continuous, but it has to be something that is regular and it has to be a true allyship with the communities. So first, be a true ally forever. And the second is that environmental justice, we talk a lot about Justice 40, and environmental justice is not a checkbox in a project, it's a philosophy to implement while you are having the inception, the first ideas of that project. So you cannot incorporate it easily after you have developed the idea. And I think it's very important that we as scientists, as policymakers, as leaders, think about the system, the whole system, and how everything affects other things. And I like to think that when I promote a solution for a problem, that solution doesn't create a new problem. That's very important for environmental justice. You have to think about the co-occurrence of issues in communities. So you just don't go to solve one problem. You need to understand the whole community. For that, it's very important to have an exchange of information with communities, but you have to understand very well how things are. So this co-occurrence doesn't exacerbate other problems while you are solving one thing. And I guess these are the two main messages I wanted to give you today. Environmental justice is a philosophy, and you have to be a true ally for the communities. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I agree wholeheartedly with your comments. So my name is Bernadette Austin. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Regional Change at UC Davis. And I'm joined today with my colleague, Juan Carlos Garcia Sanchez, who's with the UC Davis Institute for Transportation Studies and Policy Institute. We actually, for those of you joining in person, we have a poster, so I encourage you to check that out when you get a chance. So I'll share a little bit about my background, tell you a little bit about our collaboration around the Transportation Equity and Environmental Justice Advisory Group, which we call TJAG because everybody loves acronyms, and then share some of my recommendations for doing meaningful engagement. So I co-lead our research center with a faculty director. I do not have a PhD. I am not what one would consider a traditional researcher. And that model of co-leading between an academic and a community practitioner is a really powerful model that we've seen effective. So I encourage folks to look at that as a potential model. I've been in this role for 6 years. And in this role, I support research that is community engaged, policy oriented, and equity focused. As a little bit of background around my practitioner roles, I spent 10 years working in the financing and development of affordable housing and also worked for community health organizations. And currently and in the recent past, I've served both community as well as policy leadership roles. So I've served on advisory boards for the Department of Housing and Community Development, as well as the Department of Public Health's Office of Health Equity. And I've served on the board of directors for several community-based organizations, including a regional credit union, a community development corporation, and several youth-serving organizations. So I really try to bring some of that policy and community-based perspective and weave it into our research. So a little bit about our TJAG. The TJAG was originally formed during the inaugural year of the climate change research program, and it was a part of a really significant and extensive statewide collaboration. We called this the Climate Smart Transportation in Communities Consortium, or CSTAC. As I mentioned, we all love letters and acronyms, and it included a variety of partners, including 5 UC campuses: Berkeley, Davis, Irvine, UCLA and UC Riverside, Lawrence Berkeley Labs, and USC. So again, statewide public-private collaboration. So in addition to the different research partners, we had dozens of civic and community partners who've been involved. So we had representatives from government, which included local elected officials, as well as representatives from state agencies. We had national and statewide advocacy organizations, such as the Natural Resources Defense Council and the Green Lining Institute, EJ nonprofits, environmental justice groups such as Climate Plan, and several community-based organizations like Civic Thread, formerly Walk Sacramento, and the Southeast LA Collaborative. We first convened in person in September of 2019, and since then we've convened twice a year for 3 or 4 hours at a time, virtually. So we're really looking forward to having some in-person convenings soon. But it has continued beyond the initial investment. And I think that's a really critical thing. There's been wonderful capacity building, frankly, both ways, capacity building for community partners, as well as for researchers in doing meaningfully engaged, community engaged research. And so I'll share with you 3 of my take-home messages. So I would say, adding on to what my colleague said, these are some additional things for you all to think about. My first message is to compensate community partners for the experts that they are. So as a rule of thumb, I strive to budget the funding for the community partner commensurate with co-PIs or co-principal investigators. So budgeting them as experts, and you can do this contractually or honoraria. And at a minimum, I would encourage you to include a modest stipend if possible. Really, rather than asking them to volunteer. It should really, my opinion is that it should not be need-based. It should be emphasizing the really important knowledge that they bring to the work. I will also emphasize that funding community partners on research may require state changes, not just through the agencies that are here to date, but there are many state agencies that do engage in research and should really look at their policies of how we can provide stipends, honoraria, and budgeting for community partners. The second is help them prioritize the partnership. So often community-based organizations are pulled in multiple directions, and this was just exacerbated during COVID. We had partners who, I won't say they did mission creep, but they couldn't serve their nonprofit mission because there were real crises and what I would consider Maslow's hierarchy of needs. People didn't have food, they didn't have shelter, they didn't have safety. And so nonprofits really, they continue to be pulled in multiple directions. Why would they prioritize research on what they might see as sort of a long or very long range planning? Why is this research important? So how to do that is to take the time to understand the motivations of community partners. What are their top priorities? Some examples in my experience have included ways that our research can support their mission. The data gathered can support their policy goals or their fundraising goals, such as is this information that they could then include in grants, grant applications, and also including networking opportunities, which really can be facilitated through the institutional connections that we have. And the third is don't just lead, follow. More often than not, academics pursue these community partnerships for their own research. As much as possible, we in the academic community need to make time to understand and actively support the priorities of our community partners. So I'll just summarize once more: compensate community partners for the experts that they are, help them prioritize the partnership, understand what is important to them, and don't just lead, follow. And I appreciate the opportunity to engage with you all today.
Hi, folks. Good morning. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can now.
Can someone hear me? Well, good morning. I'm joining you from Eastern Los Angeles County, the city of El Monte. My name is David Diaz. I'm the executive director of Active San Gabriel Valley. We are an environmental justice and public health nonprofit focused on creating a more sustainable, equitable, and livable San Gabriel Valley. We are an organization led by people of color from the San Gabriel Valley. 90% of our staff are residents that actually graduated from being either an intern or volunteer to now full-time staff, including myself. I started off as a volunteer for the organization. For folks that are not familiar with the San Gabriel Valley, we are a large region, over 2 million people, 31 cities, 4 large unincorporated areas, very diverse. At Active SGV, we are currently the largest electric bike share operator in the United States. We've conducted the longest open streets program in the United States. We've organized wins, policy wins around mobility justice, environmental justice, parks and open space, stormwater, and single-use plastics. We have more than a decade of experience organizing around community organizing, participatory planning, secured hundreds of millions of dollars for our region. And so we work with UCLA and other partners on the planning and development of an advanced energy community in the Bassett Avocado Heights community, which is unincorporated. Here, we've also worked with UCLA and partners to conduct a robust indoor and outdoor air quality study, specifically for the Bassett Avocado Heights Advanced Energy Community Project. We started off in the planning phase of that project, and then now we are conducting the implementation. So we took what we learned and heard from community, applied that to the actual proposal in partnership with UCLA and partners, and are now currently working on the implementation of that. And so for Active SGV, we're currently helping folks access what is referred to as community solar, the community solar program, Power Share, here locally, where we, over the last 2 years, have worked to help community members or households that are income qualifying enroll into a income qualifying program for a discount, 100% renewable energy. And proud to say that we've enrolled over 360 households to do so. And if anybody's done any utility bill assistance work or enrolling people into these energy programs, you know the type of work that it requires, from going door to door to community canvassing and trust building to building a lot of relationships, cross promoting, working with school districts, working with local community groups. We've done a lot of work to get to where we are today. And so just building off of the sentiments or the advice already shared, I would say, know your community. There's nothing I dislike more than people who come in and out of the community from San Diego or other places, and then they come and try to subcontract us and give us peanuts to do the work. I think that, if you're going to do the work, really get to know your community. Here's a couple simple ways: attend local events, right? Where you are, go to Eventbrite, look for local events, go to your local city event. You'll often find partners tabling there or have a presence there. That's a good, easy way to connect with them. If they have an organizing meeting or if they have a meeting, attend the meeting just to get to know them. You could also do a search on GuideStar if you need to. The other part I would say is engage CBOs early. I really dislike this process of having us join once you're 70% through your thought process of what you want to achieve, even from things as data collection, messaging, translation, the actual approach, your idea. We don't want to come in at the tail end of a project or of a research project. We want to come in and help and co-develop and ground truth this with you. Because that goes back to knowing the community. And so I think it's really important to engage CBOs early, to be able to work alongside with them to co-test and develop the survey, messaging, language needs, etc. The other thing that I'll say again, Bernadette, that said, fund them appropriately. guess what? We don't work off of hugs and high fives. Like, we also have bills to pay. Like, you need to pay us for the expertise that we have here. Like, folks have PhDs or educational degrees, but you can't disregard the expertise that people have in their lived experience of these communities. You cannot discount that. And so you need to pay folks appropriately and make sure, and again, this goes back to the engage them early, that you're engaging them to find out what are their funding needs. Because sometimes folks will come to us and ask us to do all kinds of translation work, have multilingual speakers, do above and beyond what's required under scope without compensating us for that. And that's not okay. That's not okay. And so, and then the last thing is don't micromanage. I'll add that tip there. We're experts in our field for a reason, right? We know the community, we know what we're doing. Trust us to do the work. Please don't burden community-based organizations by trying to micromanage their work. If you knew better, you'd be doing the work, right? So please trust the community-based organizations to do the work that you've hired them to do. So with that, I'll conclude my comments.
Thank you for that great panel and that honest feedback for our academic community. It is really insightful to us to know exactly what the needs of our community partners are. So with that, I want to give one more thanks to our last panel. And then I want to welcome my next panel of academic researchers who have actually already facilitated this model and partnered with communities in their research. And they've been funded by the the Strategic Growth Council's Climate Change Research Program. So I want to welcome to the stage Gerardo Diaz. He's a professor here at UC Merced from the School of Engineering. He's worked on the project, The Future San Joaquin Valley Agriculture Under Climate Change and the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. And then I also want to invite Catherine Keski to the stage. She's also a professor here, management at the School of Engineering, and she works on the project Mobile Char Production for Methane Emissions Reductions and Soil Admit, as well as our SEEKS program, which stands for the Innovation Center for Advancing Ecosystem Climate Solutions. And then our final panelist, Josue Mendelin Azura, and he's an associate professor here at the Civil Environmental Engineering Department. And he worked on the future of San Joaquin Valley agriculture under climate change and sustainable groundwater management act, as well as incentivizing climate smart farmland transition in the San Joaquin Valley. So let's give a round of applause to our next panel.
Okay, I'm Gerardo Diaz.
Try and help.
There we go. All right. All right. So very nice being here. I'm Gerardo Diaz. Also, you can pronounce it Gerardo Diaz, whatever you want. I'm the PI for one of the Strategic Growth Council projects. The project was basically mobile biochar production for methane emission reduction and soil amendments. It's a very long title, but it has a lot of keywords there that are really, really essential for what we're seeing, not only in climate, but here in the Valley, and also with respect to the communities that live here, especially in the Valley. The idea was to basically have an analysis of can we actually do something with the biomass that is being generated pretty much every day? We have forest biomass and we have agricultural biomass. And the idea was to try to find a way in which we can actually take advantage of that and not just see it burn in wildfires or in open burning piles. The idea was to generate or produce or develop a mobile unit that we can actually convert that biomass to something called biochar, which is a material that can be used for many, many things. But one of the very nice ideas is that you can put it in the soil, and that can actually help to improve the conditions of the soil. I'm not a soil scientist, but one thing that I really want to say is that this project was a collaboration of many, many different people, 6 faculty from here from UC Merced. We have industrial partners, we have farmers, we have disadvantaged community partners. So, and when I hear everybody talking, I think they're so right when they're saying we need to find this trust in order to be able to collaborate with the communities that are here. You always seem to hear like, well, yeah, universities get a grant, but we never see any benefit out of that. Or you could actually locate it exactly in the region and still no benefit. So the interaction comes with trust. And also, one thing that is important is that we have to listen to a lot of these communities. Somebody, I think David was saying, there's a practical knowledge that we might think that we have it all figured out. And at the end, we start looking at problems and the realistic problems, little things that we didn't think about, and the whole thing doesn't work. So just translating something directly from the lab to scaling up doesn't mean that it's going to work. And there's a lot of information that comes directly from some of these partners that is what really makes the project work. So with that respect, again, the possibility of being able to interact with some of these partners and be able to see things happen at the scale that they're interested in this to work, that is really relevant because, again, I can come up with all sorts of lab scale things, and at the end, if I don't test it at the scale with the problems or with the conditions that are right there at the location, it might not work. We had, I would have liked to be able to get in contact with a lot more disadvantaged communities. Unfortunately, we were hit by COVID, and at a certain point, we could not do anything in terms of being able to get in contact. But even with that, we have been able to reach, for instance, we reached 85% reduction in methane. That the main goal of the project was to reduce methane in production of agricultural processes, and in the co-composting of material, we were able to reduce 84%. But if I go to someone, I tell you, oh, use this material, you're going to be able to reduce 84%. That's not the main problem for them. They're worried that they don't have, there's lack of water. They're worried that their fertilizer prices have skyrocketed. They're worried that they might not have food. They might worry that they might have to sell the ranch. So in the context of us saying, look, it's very important, look, the goal that we accomplished by reducing emissions, we have to put it in the perspective of the communities. We have to really understand their problems and try to do something that addresses that. Now, when I start saying, well, you get less, you're going to have to use less irrigation water, you get a higher yield, or you have, for instance, I don't know, some sort of conditions that enhance the growth of the harvest that you have, then it's something that might be something that is very useful for them. So again, just going there and trying to say, this is what we're going to do, and you sit there and look, it's a bad approach, and I think it has happened too much. And I think we have to start finally saying, look, we have to solve the problems, understanding the problems from the people that are suffering the problems. And that's the only way that we can collaborate together and we can actually address the situation. And many times, I tell you, many times the solutions came from some of the partners that say like, look, we should probably do this or that. And then, yeah, that would work. It makes total sense. And I think that's a perspective that will help us work. We have so much resources. We have so much both resources in terms of materials and things like that, but also human resources that are available. We just have to be able to take advantage of their willingness to work. They're hard workers, and they're really know the stuff. So we can get a lot of benefit out of listening and build that trust. And it's not like we're done with the project and now, sorry, we don't continue collaborating. The idea is to try to continue until we are seeing real effects happening here in the Central Valley, especially. So, okay, that's it.
Hi, I'm Catherine Keski, and I had the good fortune to be on two projects, one with Professor Diaz and one with the Center for Advancing Climate Ecosystem Climate Solutions. Those of you who are here this morning, known as SEEKS. So first of all, thank you to SGC for the funding, because I feel fortunate to have this perspective of being on two projects. Let me just give some examples of I think, things that worked well. First of all, I'm a very applied economist. And I'd like you, when you're thinking about a large project, to consider working with an economist. A lot of economists don't do applied work. I find it of great value. Hence, I found SGC's funding to be of great value. I think a big thing, and Gerardo, Professor Diaz alluded to this, I think we tried to listen to our communities. Now, I'm not saying it was perfect. I mean, COVID made it difficult to listen to anybody, really. But when we listened to communities, what that meant for my project, let's say on the mobile biochar project, we asked the stakeholders about the prices for the biochar. Now that, again, that's the substance, that's the charcoal that you could use as a soil amendment. It doesn't have a really stable market where it's traded or sold. Most of the sales are to institutions like universities or to government institutions. So we asked those who are buying and selling it what it cost, what prices they were getting. We looked to the literature, we developed a range, and then we developed some models that considered uncertainties. But the key thing, I think, that made our publication different, and our publication is about us creating a circular economy out of orchard waste. What made our publication different and is drawing attention is the fact that we asked farmers. And so I think another aspect that was really useful about the SGC funding is, as Professor Diaz said, there were 6 scientists from UC Merced getting together with our students, at times postdocs, weekly. Now, we started that in fall of roughly December 2019. You know where I'm going with that now. But we continued that discussion through the pandemic. And sometimes I would say that was the most unifying and stable thing in our lives in summer 2020. Yeah. Okay. Fall 2020, when the labs were closed, we still had our discussions about how to advance this project. And so I think if team science is done well, that's what we're looking at. Now, moving to the other project, the SEEKS project, we also had those conversations during that same time period in summer 2020 about how to move forward the larger project or the different aspects, including valuation. And as I mentioned, at a time when things are really disruptive, that seemed really stabilizing. So moving on to some other things that I think are beneficial to consider and what we did, I think, relatively well. I think we listened to each other really well on the mobile biochar grant. And I think we supported rather than competed. Now, if you're an academic, publishing is what you want to do. There's a lot of reasons for that. Number one, it gives you a standard that your research is actually good, but it can oftentimes compete with collaboration. And so if you find a group of people that you collaborate well with, you're not competing per se, you're actually sharing information and you have this sense of trust. So in summary, I think those are things that went really well for SGC. We really appreciate the opportunity, and there is some more impacts from our research as the economist. We have looked at the investment into this technology, and we've shown that the state can recover the investment and create more jobs and more revenues. So we have a second study that's in review and hope that we show that more specifically in the disadvantaged communities. So stay tuned for that. Thanks.
Thank you. Josue Medellin, Associate Professor at Civil and Environmental Engineering and a previous awardee from an SGC grant in an earlier round of funding. I was a co-PI with Cal Poly San Luis Obispo and also included other partners in the agricultural economics realm. And we look into the economics of changing San Joaquin Valley in the era of Sigma and climate change. And essentially, the project had a couple of components. One was to economically quantify how this new landscape can look in terms of costs and benefits of certain actions. And the second one was a component with community engagement. And that's what the one I'm going to elaborate a little bit more about. I will touch on three things. Essentially, meaningful engagement. The other one was is lesson learned and potential opportunities in the realm for the new rounds of funding from SGC. First one is, first thing I want to mention, and I'm stealing words from many of my colleagues, so I'll do the attributions when appropriate, is how we can only be sustainable here if we are sustainable in all sectors. We have thriving agriculture, but we also have communities and ecosystems that need our help to work in concert. So, and I think that is in the spirit of this funding program, the SGC. So communities support and also get support from agriculture and surrounding ecosystems. So these synergies need to be perpetuated in order to maintain the things they benefit from, and also agriculture get the benefits or the inputs from communities. Second is that academic products that listen to communities, as has been said by my colleagues, have much more to offer than purely technical approaches, in which some solution comes, and then, as Gerardo and Catherine and others said, there's no way to implement it. So we need to listen continuously to our communities. Agencies, academia, communities, industry often speak different languages, and they respond to a different set of incentives. So aligning those incentives in continuous conversations can be a very productive way in making a project be successful. So, and sometimes the communities and the ecosystems have voices that are deemed by the system, and that's the place in which the nonprofits, the academics, and the community leaders come into play to amplify these voices and make things happen. So this now, it was mentioned by Bernadette earlier, resources are needed to keep this engagement. So there's we have to support the community leaders, the nonprofits, in order to remain engaged in the discussion and all through the project, and obtain feedback and early enough and continuously. So other things, lessons learned, is that the pandemic, as my colleague Professor Keske mentioned, brought unprecedented challenges. We brought us into a common framework for many things. The funding of cycle of my project overlapped some of the challenges of the community. Well, one of the lessons learned, obviously, was to do early engagement of communities. So we accomplished that. But my main lesson learned was to have someone to take charge that really knows what he's doing, and that's the part in which Dr. Fernandez Bao and his team did an amazing job just engaging with communities and having these early conversations on listening what is actually needed in order to come up with some feasible solutions. So early and continuous involvement was, and having a very talented person in charge was one of the main lessons learned here in these projects. So lastly, I would like to talk about opportunities. We will listen a lot in the next few years on land repurposing and water supply augmentation to face climate extremes in communities. So having those conversations with the community partners early enough, NGOs, will help ensure that many of the voices or the needs and the challenges in implementing solutions are taken into account. There's in my alma mater, UC Davis, there's some eggheads, and there's in many places around the campus, and in one of the halls there's two eggheads talking to each other with no ears. So one of the lessons there is listen to each other. We have a lot to say, and we embracing the local knowledge is critical in order to have successful research problems and planning. And also another promising area is looking into agricultural communities in overdrafted areas that will have their landscape transformed in the next few years. And they will use a lot of our help in planning and retooling and reaccommodating economics. And that's the part in which we keep tuned on research from my colleagues, Professor Keski, Angel, and others, so to see how this happens. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here.
I want to thank our panel again for talking to us and bringing the insights of working with communities as researchers to our event. So thank you again. I'd now like to welcome our last and final panel. They're a panel of state staff as well as staff from the UC Merced campus, and they're going to talk to us about the opportunities the state has available to researchers willing to implement this engagement strategy and how the state seeks to support those kind of partnerships. So first, I want to invite Neil Matuka. He is the 5th Climate Change Assessment Program Manager. He's from the Governor's Office of Planning and Research. Shireen D'Souza, she is the Deputy Secretary for Climate Policy and Intergovernmental Relations, from the California Environmental Protection Agency. And then finally, Marjorie Zatz, she is the Interim Vice Chancellor for Research and Economic Development from the University of California, Merced. So please give them their undivided attention. I will add, you will have the opportunity to ask questions and mingle with our panelists as well as the staff from the Strategic Growth Council right after this panel. So please stick around.
Okay, well, I guess I'll start. Welcome, thanks for having me. My name is Neil Matuka. I'm the program manager for California's 5th Climate Change Assessment. It's probably need to turn this on. Yeah. The 5th assessment is a scientific assessment. I think this one's on. Yeah. Is a scientific assessment undertaken now on a 5-year basis, and it's the interagency team comprised of the Office of Planning and Research, the Strategic Growth Council, the California Natural Resources Agency, and the California Energy Commission. So very broad support amongst state agencies. And I do also want to mention that while that is the team that is given the statutory authority to implement this assessment, we also work very closely with agencies across the rest of government, researchers, and the community across the entire state, as this really is the state's climate assessment. And so as I mentioned, this is the first time that we have funding and dedicated staff. So we are using this opportunity to improve our engagement across the board, to improve our work with researchers and research institutions and community organizations that may not have previously had the ability to participate in assessments because of staffing or funding limitations, or even our own limitations in terms of our staff capacity and our timelines. It's a little bit kind of on the different types of research that we have available. We have a lot of different research that's built into the process. First, we have new climate data. These are projections and scenarios that are specific to California based off of the global models, as well as new data that is developed. This is already underway and being managed by the Energy Commission. The next set of kind of data and research that's being developed is underway right now, and we'll be seeing an RFP in the fall. And that is what is known as our core technical reports. That is new research that we are funding that is specific to California or impacts that will happen in California. So this is new research that plugs knowledge gaps. What do we need to know to be able to provide the guidance and information that the state or anyone living in the state needs to take effective action? As I mentioned, this will be released as an RFP. Hopefully at the end of this year, we are going to be holding some public roundtables with experts and the public to help winnow down the gaps in the research that we want to target with this RFP. So please look forward for that information to come out. We're anticipating it's around the end of September, and we'd love for you to participate. And kind of what I forgot to mention is we have already done a public survey as well as a state survey to identify those research gaps so that we recognize that this is, especially for some of these processes that are more academic or research focused, and may make it difficult for communities to participate. So we wanted to make sure that their voices were heard as early as possible to prioritize the areas that needed to have research, even if they were maybe not able to articulate those research gaps themselves. We heard about their needs, and we can work to translate those into what needs to be funded for research. Kind of more on the topic of this particular panel, we will be funding regional and topical reports as we have done in the past. Those are larger synthesis reports that are either based on the specific geographic region of the state and look at all of the impacts, or single impacts statewide. And for both of those reports, and they will look a little bit different due to the structure of the report, but for both of those reports, we are going to be working with communities, with researchers, and with organizations that are either statewide and specific to that topic, or that exist in that specific region. We want to make sure that each team that is working on those reports from the very beginning is comprised of the researchers, the local experts, and the community members who can drive that research and drive that synthesis process so that the reports address the needs of communities and can be implemented. We've heard in the past that what happens from the research that we have spent a lot of time and money developing is that it's not clear who should be using it, how it can be implemented. So we really want to make sure that there's a change this time around, and that these reports are useful for everyone. And lastly, just kind of shout out to CCR and the SGC team. We are going to be using their climate change research model to make sure that the community is involved in those research products.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Big thanks to Trey for bringing us together. This is a super interesting topic, and it's great to see, just hear the perspectives of everyone. I can say with a lot of certainty that I'm probably the person in this group of 9 or 10 speakers who's least engaged in research. What I work on really is the politics and policies of the state of California's climate action. That said, and one of the agencies I work the most with is CARB, the California Air Resources Board. So I work closely with them on topics like carbon capture and sequestration, methane, including the recent leaks, methane leaks from orphaned oil wells in Kern County, transportation and the air quality and greenhouse gas emissions associated with transportation. All of these are topics that first and foremost impact communities, low-income communities, communities of color, disadvantaged communities. And ultimately, as part of that policymaking team, what we want is policies that work and that make sense, right? And the research that CARB and other agencies and the UC system, the CSU system undertake, it very much informs the policies we work on. Even though politics are also an important part of it, it's really the research on the ground that drives our policy making. And so knowing that CARB and other entities are really kind of moving in this direction of increased participation by communities, community engaged research, makes it easier for us as policymakers to know that the priorities, the concerns, the like on the ground knowledge, the direct knowledge of communities is being taken into account and will be reflected in the policies that are developed. So yeah, I think, and I want to maybe just quickly highlight a couple examples that CARB, the Air Resources Board, is undertaking that's focused, that has really like the strong community engagement component. One is the Salton, there's a lot of work being done in Imperial Valley and including the Salton Sea area. So one of them is CARB has a grant through US EPA and is partnering with UC Riverside Center for Health Disparities to work with Salton Sea community representatives on issues of local concern and related research. So it's everything from like the meeting dates and the topics have been agreed to like the research process has been agreed to with local communities. And the topics have included emissions related to dust, hydrogen sulfide, lithium extraction, health effects from exposure to emissions, and then community actions to reduce emissions and exposure. Another example is some community-focused research in the Imperial Valley, where low-income communities, disadvantaged communities are subject to numerous air pollutant sources like dust from the Salton Sea, agricultural activities, traffic at the California-Mexico border, just to name a few of the sources. And so that heterogeneity of the air pollutant sources and their varying influences on local and regional air quality, it makes it really challenging to develop a comprehensive air pollution reduction strategy for the Imperial Valley that is also really equity focused. And so, we recognize that the people living in those communities, they understand the history, they understand current efforts, community needs and concerns, and have this unique perspective and ideas about how to meet those needs. And so the objective of this area of research is really to create community-based and participatory project, research project that establishes priorities and designs to address air pollution impacts and solutions in the Imperial County region. And CARB is also funding review of research in the area to serve as a sort of resource to the communities and to sort of inform their discussions as part of the project. So just a couple examples of how Cal EPA and the Air Resources Board are trying to move in the direction of additional community engagement.
Thanks. So I'm Marjorie Zetz. I'm the Interim Vice Chancellor for Research here at UC Merced. And when we think about research here, some of our key building blocks or hallmarks of research are interdisciplinarity, applied or translational research, and community engaged scholarship. That doesn't mean that we don't do fundamental disciplinary research. We do, but then most of us are interested in seeing how do we make a difference in the world with that research? How do we take it out? How do we listen to multiple perspectives? Because that's the whole point of interdisciplinarity, is getting lots of different ideas and perspectives on things so that you have a better understanding. Do research that makes a difference in partnership with our communities. We were very proud to receive the Carnegie Foundation's Community Engagement Classification in 2015, when we were only 10 years old at the time, and we were already recognized as a leader nationally in this area. This classification recognizes colleges and universities nationwide that have an institutional focus on community engagement. So it's not just individual researchers doing it, but the institution saying this is part of who we are and what matters to us. So we've been talking all day about the importance of partnerships, of working hand in hand with those people on the ground. Because community-informed research improves our science and our scholarship at the same time that it lets us lend our knowledge to solving really important community needs, working together. It focuses our thinking on those critical problems. And as we see in the area of climate research, there are just so many issues. I mean, every day when you listen to the news, you're seeing another manifestation of the problems that have been arising. It's critical that we're working together and gaining from knowledge, perspectives, and experience of different partners. So when we talk about doing community engaged research, we're not just talking about swooping in and getting information, doing a survey of people. We're talking about working together to define the problems, to design and carry out the research, and to interpret the results. It means that the work is better focused, it's more practical in its implications, and it's able to meet the real community needs as defined by the communities. And different communities will define those needs in different ways. We recognize that UC Merced was very purposefully located in the Central Valley to make a real difference here in the Central Valley, to strategically grow opportunities in the Central Valley by working with our communities hand in hand to do that. That's who we are. That's what we try to do. Now, you've been hearing earlier today about some of the current research being conducted at UC Merced that incorporates very strong community involvement, including water management, agricultural technology, biochar, and other biofuels. Other projects, just to speak of a few ongoing things that are happening, include our new experimental smart farm, which we're planting this fall for the first time. The work being done on it in the areas of labor and automation, including very cool advanced agricultural technology. Our engagement with the Fresno Merced Future of Food Project, solar coverings over irrigation canals, research on farm worker health, rural health and health disparities, health impacts of vehicle-related air pollution, which we very much appreciate the funding for. All of these are impacted by climate change. Climate justice analyses and actionable programs with indigenous communities around the world, as well as locally, and other stakeholders. These are just a few of the kinds of projects that we're engaged in right now, all of which require our researchers to work in very close partnership with state agencies, community organizations, farmers and ranchers, and trusted members of the community, whether they're in a formal role or not. So this is some of the really exciting work that's going on here, and we would love to have others partner with us in that and to continue to work together to address the issues confronting the state, the nation, the world. So thank you.
Thank you. So that concludes our kind of panel portion of this morning. I just wanted to thank our latest panel, but then also all of our panels. So maybe one last round of applause. So I think I'll just wrap us up by reflecting on some of the things that we heard today. We had our first panel with our community partners who really kind of put forward a call to action around what it looks like to not just meaningfully engage, but meaningfully partner with community in research, not just when the cake is 75% baked, but from the beginning to help actually scope out that research in a way that then produces tools that are beneficial. We talked about compensation. We talked about getting to know the community deeply. deeply before entering into that partnership. From our second panel, we heard from researchers at UC Merced and other universities in California about the value of that partnership through the climate change research funding in building those relationships, not just for the period of that one project, but likely lasting beyond into new projects. And I think that's really important, both the sustainability of those partnerships, as well as kind of the lasting impact to other research at campus. And then on our third panel, we heard about really exciting things happening at the statewide level, including the fifth assessment, which is taking forward the climate change research partnership model into statewide kind of groundbreaking new research that's going to help the state put forward policy and strategies well into the future. And then we also heard from our partners at UC a commitment to continuing to push research that's done at the UC system to continue finding those partnerships and embedding equity into our processes moving forward. And so for takeaways from the climate change research program, we're really, really proud of this program. We spent 3 hours this morning just kind of showcasing the work. And the first panel or the first part of this morning where some of you we were talking about the research that is actually funded, high quality research that is directly impacting forest management, fire management practices and policy at the statewide level, not just research that sits on a shelf. As a planner, I also often talk about plans that sit on a shelf, but research that is immediately being implemented by our state partners and that partnership that is created through the funding. And then today's panel, the second part of our program that we're really proud of, is pushing on those research community partnerships to make the research ultimately valuable both for the state, our regional local partners, and then our communities who are doing the work on the ground. So I just wanted to share those takeaways and then encourage continued dialogue right after this as we kind of move into our networking session. We've got time from about now till about 11:45 to engage with the posters, engage with our researchers, and engage with our community partners this morning before moving into our council meeting that starts at 1 o'clock today. So again, thank you all for being here and thank you for having us join you here at UC Merced today.